Hi, welcome to the Three Times podcast. Today I'm talking to multi-instrumentalist Caroline Guirr, a musician from the Tyne Valley whose work encompasses songwriting, performing, composing, arranging and producing for her solo career, her duo with Tom Cantwell, various bands, and for the Tyne Valley Big Band and the Prudhoe Community Band. Caroline is not one to shy away from challenging subjects in her music, which draws on her interest in jazz, pop and classical, which she uses to great effect in support of her thoughtful and personal lyrics. Caroline talks about her multifaceted career, her process of creating and publishing music, and her involvement in the music of her community. This episode includes 3 of Caroline's songs. That Day from the 2024 album Make the Most of Everything, and This Long Happy Life and Four Dusty Shoes from the album Diamonds and Stars, which was released in 2021. You can find Caroline's music on the usual streaming platforms, and you can buy all her albums from her website and Bandcamp page. I've included links in the show notes.
He can see where he went wrong, all for her own good, not for his fun. He had to take her down a peg or so. A little black and blue shouldn't make her go. He strikes her face when she says no. Tears that sparkle through the bruise, until the day she left a note. She left it all with what she wrote. She thought about him every day, through the summer and the fall, until one day she realized she didn't think of him at all. All the time and all those tears, courage finally takes her through the door. Sadness that can never heal, but he's losing.
Caroline Guirr, thank you for talking to Three Times podcast. Can I first ask you to describe your music?
It's mostly sort of settles into the pop vein, I would say, but with a very strong jazz influence permeating it, which I think is noticeable.
And where did that come from?
From an early age, I always loved jazz. My dad absolutely adored jazz. Oscar Peterson was his favourite. So he used to play me all sorts of things like that from a very early age, and I loved it from a very early age. So I was steeped in mostly piano trio jazz, I suppose, from early on, and liked pop music as well, and stuff like classical and soul and funk, and then later on everything else really, like folk and all sorts. But yes, I think I'm entrenched with jazz within a pop setting.
Now, your work covers all sorts of aspects of music, doesn't it? You've got a studio, which we're sitting in now. You write, you arrange, you record and you perform. So you're clearly a trained musician. Can you talk about your musical upbringing?
I didn't come from a musical family as such, although my dad had a lovely voice and loved music. But I remember going to Woolworths as a 5-year-old and singing guitar and thinking, I want to play that. And next door had a Bontempi organ, and whenever we went round I would play that endlessly. So my parents bought me a little Magnus chord organ, which I taught myself on, and then I learnt the chord of it at primary school like people did then.
I tried and failed.
Yeah, they go soggy, don't they? I just played this organ so much that eventually they got me a piano when I was 10. The queue for piano lessons was actually 3 years, and that was actually the best thing, I thought, because I just totally taught myself and learnt so much about harmony and develop an ear training, and that side of it. And then later on, had classical technical lessons on the piano. And then I started trumpet at secondary school. I was a little bit later to all of that than some people, but I did all the grades on them and that sort of thing. So yes, I had the benefit of classical education as well as teaching yourself education.
Yeah, across a broad range of instruments too. You didn't,
Yes.
although the guitar took your fancy at age 5, you didn't stay with guitar, you moved on to other stuff.
Yes, well, the piano was my main instrument. The trumpet I still play and played a lot and took seriously as well, I suppose. So, but they were the main ones. And then I took up bass guitar well into adulthood, really, when I was teaching at college, and I was running ensembles and we didn't have a bass player. So I became that bass player and absolutely loved it. So the bass was a later thing. Since then I've sort of dabbled in comedy pub drums, nothing of any seriousness. So that's about it, really. Yeah.
And what kind of music were you listening to from the outset? What kind of music?
As a child?
Yes.
A lot of jazz, like I've said, a lot of just the pop that was on the radio, quite a lot of classical as well, really. Yeah, so 3 distinct streams.
Yeah. Now, I read an interview with you, which is available online, in which you said your favourite artist was John Martin, your favourite album, Solid Air.
Yes.
You and I agree on that. That's my Desert Island Disc album. And I was very interested to hear that, because when I was listening to your music, it's almost the polar opposite of John Martin. John Martin has a very improvisational style, heavily jazz influenced, folky blues, and very loose and fluid. Yours, on the other hand, is highly arranged, isn't it?
Yes.
And carefully thought out. How do you think this paradox lives inside you?
Well, although it's the music that I record is highly arranged, as a player, I'm not highly arranged. I'm very much of a just improvisey person as a player, so I suppose that aligns more with the John Martin way of doing things. And I'm very much like to change what I play all the time. I'm not one of those people that learns solos or lines or anything like that. I just like to chop and change. So that aligns with the John Martin side of things. The textural side of things, obviously I kind of like to build up lots of different textures. That's just because you can, really, especially in these days. I mean, I loved John Martin, but also I absolutely adored Danny Thompson as well. So his other players were influential as well as him.
Danny Thompson is the bassist. You to play a stand-up bass, just for the benefit of people who've not yet had the pleasure of listening to John Martin on Solid Air. Would it be fair to say that you sit in your studio here and improvise and just play around, and is that how you create ideas for your songs?
A mixture, really, to start with. I tended to write songs sitting at the piano like people do, and that's a case of messing on and seeing what notes I liked. So I approached it from the music point of view, and then added lyrics and melodies that fitted. But there comes a point where you've kind of done all of that, really, so you need a different way of doing things to make sure that you continue exploring. So these days I tend to write the lyrics first. So I've changed. I might change back. I mean, I'll do the odd thing where I might start at the piano still, but it's more of a lyric-led process now than when I first started, when it was very much a sit down and improvise and sing what comes out.
And of course, I think if you write the lyrics first, then you have to have the musical tools to be able to express the mood that you want. So this presumably is where your classical training comes in handy.
Yes, I suppose so, because I love arranged bits in my songs. So I actually, not always, but if I've got like a brass section, I'll arrange it on Sibelius in the manner of a traditionally classical arranger would arrange things. So I notate sections that I'll then play and put on top of the tracks. Know what harmony-wise, so I'll know what I want to put in before I've put it in often, although obviously there's exploring, experimenting and accidents, which are always a good thing as well. So it's a mixture of knowing what I'm doing and just experimenting with what comes out.
So I think the thing behind my question is, when you have your lyrics largely complete, do you think to yourself, this song is going to be in a certain key and it's going to have a certain feel and a certain instrumentation, because I know that that's what's going to deliver the kind of mood that I'm after?
Not so much from the lyrics themselves, but sometimes I suppose the subject matter might make you choose a particular key. Also, of course, if it's sung, then that's going to put constraints on where it might start.
Yeah.
And also the mood of the piece is, D minor being the saddest of all keys and all that.
Yes.
You choose a key for something that might suit a particular the subject of a song. So it's a bit of an osmosis of all sorts of different factors, I would say.
Yeah. In the same interview, which we're both talking about now, I will put the link to this in the show notes. You say that when you write the lyrics, you're thinking about the story that you want to tell.
Yes.
And it struck me that when people talk about stories in lyrics, that's more of a country music thing, typically, isn't it? Have you ever dipped your toe in the country music waters?
I love listening to, especially modern country. I don't think anything's really come out in the country style. There are a few songs that are a bit folky, which also has a tradition of storytelling, I suppose. I think it's more that when you write song after song after song, you don't want to keep saying the same thing. You don't want to be saying the thing that everybody else says. You want to have some surprises so that people are going to keep listening, and you want it to resonate with your audiences. That sounds a bit optimistic, doesn't it?
One audience would be enough for most people.
Well, yes. If one person likes it, and that's just me, that's good enough. So you want it to have a bit of a general appeal, as well as not being an introspective thing, which is such an easy way to fall into, that many songwriters do fall into that.
Your lyrics are clearly very well thought out. They do deal with some quite challenging topics. A couple of tracks I came across when I was listening to your music on your Bandcamp page, I should say, where people can find pretty much everything you've done, I think, can't they? There's a track called Later On Today, and another one called This Long Happy Life.
Yes.
They both deal with death. In one case, the death of your mother.
Yes.
Now, these are difficult topics to put into a song, both because they affect you intimately and they can affect other people. So how did you go about framing that?
Later On Today is definitely a personal song where it just doesn't go along with what I just said a few minutes ago. But I think when you go through such poignant rites of passage, I suppose, you can't help but want to put that in motion into music. And you have such a strong sort of mind's eye of remembering that very intense last part of a person's life, especially when it's your parent, that you can't stop seeing it. So that just sort of spilled into the music, because I couldn't stop seeing it, and I needed to explain it to myself as much as anybody else, because when you put these things together, then it helps you find peace with it, I suppose, because it's there for your own acceptance and reflection. Whereas the other one, This Long Happy Life, was again, I think, very much about, in particular, one of my aunts, because she said one of the quotes that became one of the main parts of the song, along with John Lemaire's supposed attributed last words, and that what gave that lovely sentence that I wanted to write a song about. But there are so many sad and poignant songs about the cycle of life, if you like, ending in death, that I wanted to write something that was reassuring and comforting, again, to try and help with the acceptance of such situations which most people will find themselves in. So that's why I wanted to write that one.
She lays her sandwiches, egg mayonnaise, just the right amount of mustard and pepper, a sprinkling of too much salt, that was the trouble. Onion cut so small, mixed with red Leicester. All she can do now is remember. She thought he'd be here forever, forever. Multi-hops, frothy beer, hand pull pints, cheese clouds subdued butter. Why isn't he here, still living? Sad cakes made with yesterday's jam. All she can do now is remember his presence settled here, comforts the grieving. Here's to us all, to long happy lives. Here's to the future, to long happy times. Here in our hearts, here in our lives, it's all rather wonderful, this long happy life. She lays out sandwiches, she lays out tea, she lays out reminders of what has been. She lays out sandwiches, she lays out tea, she lays out reminders of what has been. On down for a nightcap in the town, welcoming hugs from the familiar crowd, accompanied by comforting sounds, strumming favorite songs, singing familiar rounds. A quivering hand reads the letter found. His goodbye to them all, setting it out.
Here's to you all. I've had a long happy life. Here's to your future, to your long happy times. I'm here in your heart, I'm here in your life. It's all been wonderful, this long happy life. Here's to us all, to long happy lives. Here's to the future, to long happy times. Here in our hearts, here in our lives, it's all rather wonderful. Here's to life. Here's to life.
And how do you feel about performing these songs? Do you perform the one about your mother?
Not very often. I'm happy to do This Long Happy Life because, again, I think that's a more of an external song. Later on today, I have done it a couple of times, but it's one of those ones I play more on my own to myself.
Yeah. There are some songs that you write to express how you feel that you don't really want to be feeling that way very often, but sometimes you do. And maybe it's not something that you want to share all the time either.
And that song has a particular clashy chord in it that I just think epitomises that feeling of tension and resolution in equal measure, which is again something I sort of enjoy playing to myself, but I'm not sure everyone would like that chord.
And was that something that came to you by chance, or did you think, I need to create a moment of dissonance and tension here?
No, I think it was just the mood of that subject required that chord, I think. It was, which is this.
And what is that for musical aficionados?
Well, it's like an A sus. So you've got your root and your thought. Sorry about the piano, there's a reason why it's so out of tune, but I'll work on this. So you've got your root, your suspended fourth. If it was classical, you call it a suspension, and your fifth. And classically, the fourth would resolve onto the third. It doesn't in jazz and pop and all sorts, but that's just traditionally. But I kept both of them in, so you had the fourth and the third.
All right.
So it's really
the third and the fourth is the kind of unsettling.
I just love it.
I noticed also in your lyrics that you don't write about politics, or you don't seem to write torch songs. Am I right about that?
I've done one or two, but that is kind of one or two. And when I do them, they're a little bit obscure, not obscure, but sort of veiled a little. Like the one on the last album, That Day, is a song about physical abuse and relationship. So that's, I suppose, not a torch song, but a torched song, maybe. I don't know. So that's a bit of a protest song. And then I did one quite early on called Riders in the Banana, which is tiny bit political, but that was like one of my very early ones, and I was just sort of wandering off down all sorts of avenues. But no, I tend not to, because there's lots of other people can write those sort of songs, and I don't feel that's an area where I can particularly contribute anything new, or I think that's probably why.
In your last album, Make the Most of Everything, the notes said that every song had a positive aspect in some way. That was obviously something you wanted to do. Yes,
well, most of them do have. Somebody once said to me that it's really hard to write a happy song, and I saw that as a challenge. So that's stuck with me, that I almost see it as a role I've given myself to write positive and uplifting songs, quite not all the time, because there's lots of ones about sadness and bereavement and other things like that, but I do like to keep putting in the positive and the embracing. I do a lot of things about nature and outside and that sort of visual and olfactory enjoyment of the world, which I think I like to do that for my bit for adding to the catalogue.
Well, there's a lot of negativity and anger about at the moment, isn't there? Do you find that people find your songs refreshing, or do they come to you afterwards and after a performance and say, well, I'm glad you sang that, or it's nice to have a more uplifting performance than the kind of things that we're used to?
They do, quite a lot of people comment on that, and quite a lot say, oh, that really resonates with something that happened to me, which is what you want as a songwriter, really, is for other people to say, that speaks to me, that. And for people to say that some people said, it sort of makes me think, get a grip, be more positive, enjoy things. So yes, I'm pleased when people do pick up on that, and they do.
And this comes from a more positive view of life, or is there another, for example, some religious or philosophical belief underlying it?
There's no religious or philosophical belief underlying it, other than that constantly to be aware of life being a short journey, and so we should make the most of everything. So I'm just constantly trying to reassure that message, both to myself and to anybody else who might want to
Yeah.
listen to it and appreciate it. So it's really just a affirmation of the journey we're all on, really, that I want to keep referring back to.
Now we're sitting in your magnificent studio. Can you tell me a bit about your workflow when you're recording?
Most of the time, the song's completely written in terms of chords and melody and lyrics, but not completely, but a lot. So when I think, right, I've got to start recording this now, it's changed over the years. I think the big thing that's really changed is that back in the day, you had to get a drummer in and spend several miserable days trying to mic it up properly, and then trying to think of a way of how you could get the drummer to understand what you were trying to do, then fit everything around that. And I would still really prefer to record with live drums, but I haven't for a long time now because it's so much easier to use the loops and what have you that you can buy yourself and get online.
Yeah.
That does have its constraints and restrictions as well, but it's in terms of having the quality of the recording of the drums, that makes it easier. But having said that, I'll then play on top of it. I'll add cymbals and hits, sometimes live cymbals. Sometimes I'll just do a MIDI thing. I quite often add other percussion like tambourines or bits and pieces on top of that. I'll probably start with that. I suppose that's what I'm trying to say. Unless
Which drum software do you use?
All sorts, really. I mean, obviously some Apple loops like people use, but then lots of people have made patterns and loops, got addictive drums, got various other samples that have been collected from all over the place. So it's a mixture of things, really. Then, having got that as a sort of placeholder, I'll probably then play a rough piano line, then start replacing it with a proper bass. I'll do the bass guitar myself now. In the past I have done some synth bassy lines, but most of it now is all real bass. And then I'll start building up with the proper keys, and then I'll do the vocals. And at that point I'll try to say to myself, that's it, that's finished, but I cannot leave it alone.
No, songs are never finished, are they?
So at that point I think, oh, that needs some trumpet, or oh, that needs I'll get Tom and say, I need some guitar on this, and then I'll start putting all different bits and pieces in, and then sometimes you have to take half of it out, and that's generally how it works. And then, yes.
So you use the AW?
Yes.
Yeah, which one?
Pro Tools mostly,
Right.
yes. But I do use bits of Sibelius, actually, just as, like I said, to get the charts right. But as for the Pro Tools as the actual recording, I've got Logic, and I've used that occasionally, but Pro Tools mainly.
Yeah. And you mentioned there your husband Tom.
Yes.
What's his input on your recordings?
He does the guitar, because I can play just about everything, well, obviously not the saxophone and stuff, except the guitar. Well, I could do bad guitar, but obviously I don't want bad guitar. So I'll really leave him to do the guitar. And it's not guitar on everything, but when I need some guitar, I'll try and book him, which is not always easy. And then I'll get him to do vocals quite often as well, because he's a good singer as well as being an excellent guitarist. Other than that, he doesn't really get involved in me working in the studio, except he's obviously brilliant at saying, well, have you tried doing this with the EQ? Because EQ is always the hardest thing.
Yeah.
And I'll say, I can't get this to not eat up the bandwidth of that. And so he'll come in and fiddle the EQ for me. So he'll come in and help with the mixing.
Yeah.
On some of it, not on all of it, but on some of it. And I've got another friend who's an absolutely fantastic singer, songwriter, guitarist, musician called Linda Campbell. So sometimes if I'm stuck, I'll send something to her and say, what should I do with this? So they're the two people I would take advice from during the process.
And so you mix and master it yourself?
I mix a whole lot myself. I mastered everything myself up until 2 albums ago. And I just decided I can master it myself, because I've got Isotope and 1,000 Ozone plugins, like some things I do master myself. But the last 2 albums I've actually treated myself to outside mastering, which was John Astley at Close to the Edge Mastering, who used to work at Abbey Road. I think he still does go there a bit. And he's fantastic, because it's one of those subtle things. You can't really hear the difference between somebody that's professionally mastered it and somebody who hasn't, except you totally can. It's a funny thing. That fine little thing that always remains a bit mysterious is for it to sound good on, in the car, on your phone, on a hi-fi, on Spotify, as well as Bandcamp and Amazon and everything. So it's that thing where it sounds good on all the different things. That's is slightly. I think that's where the skill is. That's a professional masterer has. When it comes to the marketing of it, absolutely useless and rubbish, and can't do it, and wish I could. And you think today, right, I'm going to do some PR and send it off to somewhere, and then they'll sit down, it can be 5 minutes, and then find I've at the piano playing some Clementi or something instead. So in terms of having a goal for getting out in the world, I wish someone would do that for me, because I haven't got the motivation. I mean, I do things. I do send it off to places and do package it up, and I do all my own artwork, and I do promotion stuff, and so I do a lot, but not. I suppose my motivation isn't looking for like a massive amount of people to listen to it. It would be lovely if they did, but it's not my priority. My priority, I'd be off doing some other musical endeavour rather than trying to get an audience. In terms of who listens to it, people I know and people you see in local audiences, of course, but in the ones who've picked it up across the world are usually people who are interested in the piano. Not necessarily so that I think the piano parts seem to cut through to other pianists. So that's how a lot of my, the people who sort of discover it tend to be people that like piano music, I think.
Now, I mentioned when I started talking to you about all the other things that you do, one of which is arranging, and I saw that you arrange music for the Tyne Valley Big Band.
Yes.
And Callum Tordoff tells me that you're quite active in the music scene in Prudhoe. Yeah. So could you tell me a bit more about that?
Well, Tyne Valley Big Band is a community band based in Hexham, run by Dave Hignett. It's around about 25 people, sort of goes up, goes down, a mixture of amazing professional players and then also community players. And it's a really fun band. It's a big band, but it does a very wide range of material, from pop, rock to funk to regional, swing, jazz, everything. A lot of it's instrumental based, but also Barbara Hignett sings with it as well, and she's an amazing singer. And every now and then Dave will say to me, "Oh, Barbara wants to do this song, can you arrange it?" So then I'll arrange it for the whole band, and I do really enjoy arranging. The last one I did was Dancing Queen, which was actually a kind of reworking of an arrangement that Dave had done for just a few instruments. Before that I did All That Jazz. I did a kind of poppy, funky version of God Save the King when we needed that, and a few other things. So I love arranging. I've arranged for orchestras and big bands and other bands and things. So that's that band. In terms of Prudhoe, Tom and I play quite a lot together, just the two of us, where he sings and plays guitar, I play piano and backing vocals. Quite often we'll add Callum in on cajon and backing vocals, and sometimes we add in people on saxophone like Bridget Eniver, who's local person as well, or Eric Minto, or some other people. So we'll expand and disband as the occasion suits. So we do that as a duo as well. That's our main Prudhoe presence, if you like. Yes, so the Riverside Festival, it's run by the Prudhoe Community Partnership. We're both on that, so input into that, some ideas. So
and that's is it in July this year?
July, I think it's the 13th. It's a Saturday, kind of all day, with local bands and acts on. So that's
Can you remember
nice.
who's on?
The morning is things like starts with Prudhoe Community Band, which I'm also in. Then you got the choirs like the Prudhoe Gleeman and the Prudhoe Community Choir, Dragon Tail Theatre Group. You've got a few solo young artists playing earlier on, and then you get people like Tom and me, and and Callum. We're sort of build together, but we may do separate things or together things. Then you've got Whistle Testers, John Robson's one of his bands, and you've got the Central Arcade, who's sort of university lads, Paul Mooney's son's band.
Based in Hexham,
Yes, so they're very good. There's another big local band with Jetlag, is it? I think they're on this year, they were on last year. So so it's a mixture of bands and community groups. solo artists. There was a few solo artists.
Whereabouts in Prudhoe, is it?
The amphitheatre down on the riverside. So you go down to the river and there's a cafe.
Yes.
If you sort of start walking on the river east,
Yes.
a little way along there, there's a natural, well, not natural, I think it was built a sort of grassy bit with a grass bank. It's on there, so it's very nice.
And what other plans do you have for the rest of 2025?
Next week, got quite a big event going on. Tom and I are both going to France. There's a festival called Yes or Notes Festival in Saint-Étienne-du-Rouvray, near Rouen, and it's the 20th anniversary of their festival, and it's also on the day of the anniversary of the end of World War II. So the town council are having a peace festival. So it's a 4-day event. There's a few things going on. We're going with doing an hour-long set with 2 of us doing our band, but also with Eric on saxophone and Ben Craig's on bass guitar. For years, when we both worked at Gateshead College, we used to take student bands every year. Ben was one of those students back in the day. He was a professional musician now, so he's coming back after lots of years. So that's the 4 of us, and then the French drummer we know will be our 5th. So we've got a big night, but also there's about 28 Germans going, which consists of a professional band and lots of student bands, who we know quite a lot of them, and then there's the professional French teachers and musicians because it's a music school. So there's quite a few bands where we'll collaborate, the French, English and German, so that's quite poignant on this particular occasion.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Ukrainian dancers are going to be there. So we're doing a soul funk band, we're doing a rock and another funky band and a jam session, and so there's all sorts of intermingling as well as separate events. Also, Steve Chettle, don't know if you know him, he's got a big project called the Peace Bugle, Instruments for Peace Not War. And this Peace Bugle piece, he got Sally Beamish to write a bugle call for peace, and I've been quite involved in, consulting him on that, and I've played the bugle on various recordings for that, and the French team are going to play that at Les Zéniths and then march to the town hall. So that's next week, so that's quite a big deal.
That is a very big event, yeah.
Yes, and then the Tyne Valley Big Band's got quite a lot on, the Corbridge Beer Festival, the Cambridge Beer Festival, the Royal Keys, quite a few other things. I play with a community band that's doing Beamish next Saturday, and then we'll do some duo things. I should start thinking about my next album, which I haven't decided quite what that will be yet.
Do you have some songs ready for it, or do you think, are you just thinking, well, what kind of songs do I want to write in the next few months that would fit into an album?
Yes, more that. I want to do something a little bit different, and I haven't quite decided which way. I've never done a covers album. Maybe I should do one of those.
Yeah.
Maybe I should go back to being a bit more jazzy and ambient, like my earlier songs were, rather than they've been getting a bit more mainstream recently, which I like, but maybe it's time to do a particular themed subject or something, just letting the world sink in for a bit and see what comes out.
Something will emerge.
Something will emerge.
Something will emerge in the foreseeable future.
Yes.
And so maybe we'll see an album by the end of the year.
Maybe. Probably not, because it takes so long to do the actual recording once you've got the songs, but I'll definitely be working on it, yes.
And when people want to look for your music, how will they find it?
Well, I've got my own website, which is carolineguirr.com, and that's got links to all the other places. Bandcamp is a great place because you can see all the different albums. How can I not remember it? SoundCloud. I've got everything's on SoundCloud, and then it's on Amazon and Apple and Deezer and Tidal and all those sort of places as well. So all the usual places. Yeah. And I've got lots of actual physical CDs, which some people would still like to have. So.
And they can get them through Bandcamp?
They can, or directly from me.
Or your website?
Yes, or just contacting me somehow. Yeah. Facebook music page.
Caroline Guirr, thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve.
Secrets held like a curled up fragrant rose, the scent of daydreams in a scarlet rose, lingering dusty shoes standing softly on memories. Four dusty shoes tread on hushing spun silk. Four dusty shoes reflect light around them. Four dusty shoes start a new velvet dance. Dancing again, we carousel in the night. Hearts beat together, feeling so right. Imagining music, hands warm in the light. Dusty dreams now played out in the night. Four dusty shoes standing softly on memories. Four dusty shoes tread on hushing spun silk. Four dusty shoes reflect light around them. Four dusty shoes start a new velvet dance. Four dusty shoes standing softly on memories. Four dusty shoes tread on hushing spun silk. Four dusty shoes reflect light around them. Four dusty shoes start a new velvet dance.
Thanks for listening to the Three Times podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe and tell your friends about it.